My name is Jake and I work as a plumber for a large construction company in Detroit. My wife Rebecca worked as an accountant at an insurance company office. We had lived together for 7 years and I thought I knew everything about her. How wrong I was. It all started on that rainy Tuesday in March when I was driving home from work and saw a small orange kitten by the side of the road. He was wet, thin and clearly needed help. I couldn't just drive past. I stopped, picked him up and drove straight to the nearest animal shelter. There they told me that the cat would hardly be adopted. He wasn't quite a kitten anymore, orange cats were common, and the shelter was overcrowded. If no one took him within a week, they'd have to put him down. I looked into those green eyes and my heart couldn't take it. I took the papers and brought him home. When I walked into our apartment with the carrier, Rebecca was in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Honey, what's that?" she asked, seeing the carrier. "Found a kitten on the road. He would have been dead within a week at the shelter," I explained, letting the orange beauty out. Rebecca suddenly started looking strangely at the cat, but said nothing. I thought she was just surprised by the unexpected addition to our household. The first few days everything seemed normal. We named the cat Charlie. He turned out to be very affectionate and smart. He quickly got used to the litter box, didn't scratch the furniture, and generally behaved like a perfect pet. I genuinely became attached to him. But after a week, I noticed that Rebecca started acting strangely. She was constantly sneezing, her eyes were red and watery. At first I thought she had caught a cold. "Maybe you should see a doctor?" I suggested. "No, everything's fine, it's just spring pollen," she replied, but her voice sounded somehow tense. This went on for weeks. Rebecca became irritable, constantly snorted when Charlie approached her. I thought she just wasn't used to having animals in the house. The strangest thing was that she started staying late at work. She used to always come home at 6, but now she might come home at 8 or even later. "Lots of work at the end of the quarter," she explained. I believed her. Why wouldn't I believe my wife after 7 years of marriage? During this time, our relationship began to deteriorate in ways I couldn't understand. Rebecca became distant, avoided physical intimacy, and seemed constantly on edge. When I tried to discuss it with her, she would dismiss my concerns or blame stress from work. "You're imagining things, Jake," she would say. "I'm just tired." But I wasn't imagining the way she would leave the room whenever Charlie entered, or how she would take allergy medication that I thought was for seasonal allergies. I wasn't imagining how she would work late into the evening, sometimes not coming home until after I had already gone to bed. Charlie, meanwhile, had become my constant companion. He would greet me at the door when I came home from work, curl up next to me while I watched TV, and sleep at the foot of our bed. Rebecca had started sleeping in the guest room, claiming I snored too loudly, but I suspected it was because of Charlie. One evening in late April, I decided to surprise Rebecca by picking her up from work. I had finished a job early and thought we could grab dinner together like we used to. When I arrived at her office building, I saw her through the glass doors talking animatedly with a tall man in a suit. She was laughing, really laughing, in a way I hadn't seen in months. When she saw me approach, her expression changed immediately. The laughter died on her lips and she looked almost guilty. "Jake, what are you doing here?" "Thought I'd surprise you. Maybe we could grab dinner?" The man she had been talking to extended his hand. "You must be Jake. I'm Roger, Rebecca's colleague. She talks about you all the time." I shook his hand, noting how he seemed to know more about me than I knew about him. "Nice to meet you. Roger and I were just finishing up some quarterly reports," Rebecca said quickly. "Very boring stuff." But there was something in the way they looked at each other, a familiarity that made me uncomfortable. I pushed the feeling aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. That night, Rebecca was even more distant than usual. She barely touched her dinner and went to bed early, claiming exhaustion. I stayed up with Charlie, scratching behind his ears and trying to shake the feeling that something was very wrong with my marriage. The next few weeks were a blur of increasing tension. Rebecca's late nights became more frequent. She would come home smelling like coffee and cologne that wasn't mine. When I asked about her day, her answers became shorter and more evasive. "How was work?" "Fine." "Anything interesting happen?" "Not really." "Still working on those quarterly reports with Roger?" "Among other things." It was like living with a stranger who happened to look like my wife. Meanwhile, my relationship with Charlie deepened. He seemed to sense my distress and would often sit with me in the evenings, purring contentedly while I scratched his head. He was the one constant source of comfort in my increasingly unstable home life. One Saturday morning in early May, I woke up to find Rebecca already dressed and preparing to leave. "Where are you going?" I asked, still groggy. "Office. More work to catch up on." On a Saturday? End of fiscal year, Jake. You know how it is. But I didn't know how it was because she had never worked weekends before in all the years I'd known her. After she left, I sat with Charlie and really looked at our situation. My wife was avoiding me, working constantly, and seemed miserable at home. I was spending more time talking to my cat than to the woman I had married. Something had to change. I decided to do something romantic, something to remind us both why we had fallen in love. I spent the day cleaning the apartment, cooking her favorite meal, and setting up candles in the dining room. I even bought flowers, the expensive ones from the fancy florist downtown. When Rebecca came home that evening, she stopped in the doorway of the dining room, looking shocked. "What's all this?" "I thought we needed a nice evening together. We haven't really talked in weeks." She looked around the room, then at me, and I saw something that looked almost like sadness cross her face. "Jake, this is very sweet. But I'm not really hungry. I ate at the office." "At the office? At 8 p.m. on a Saturday?" "We ordered pizza while we worked." I felt something inside me break a little. "We? The team. Roger and I and a few others." Roger again. Always Roger. We sat down at the table anyway, Rebecca picking at the food while I tried desperately to salvage the evening. "Remember our first date?" I asked. "You wore that blue dress and we went to that little Italian place downtown." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That was a long time ago." "Not that long. 7 years isn't a lifetime." "Sometimes it feels like it," she said quietly, then seemed to realize what she had said. "I mean, it feels like we've grown up so much since then." We sat in uncomfortable silence for a while, Charlie weaving between our legs under the table. Every time he brushed against Rebecca, she would stiffen slightly. "Rebecca," I said finally, "are you happy?" The question hung in the air between us. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I don't know anymore, Jake. I really don't know." That night, she slept in the guest room again, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling with Charlie purring beside me, wondering how my marriage had become so fragile without me even noticing. The breaking point came 2 weeks later on a Thursday evening. I had been called to an emergency job, a burst pipe in an apartment building that flooded 3 units. I worked until almost midnight, covered in mud and exhausted. All I wanted was to come home, shower, and collapse into bed. But when I opened our apartment door, I found Rebecca in the hallway with a packed suitcase. She was crying, but not from allergies. This was different. This was the kind of crying that comes from deep emotional pain. "What's happening?" I asked, dropping my tool bag and approaching her. She looked at me, then at Charlie, who was purring and rubbing against my legs after my long absence. "Jake, I can't live like this anymore. I have a severe allergy to cats. A really severe allergy. I didn't tell you right away because I could see how happy you were with Charlie. But I'm suffocating here, crying constantly, getting headaches every single day." I was stunned. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? We could have figured something out." "Because I knew you wouldn't want to give him up. And now it's too late. I've found another solution." "What solution?" She wiped her tears and looked me in the eyes with a determination I hadn't seen in months. "I'm moving in with Roger. We've been together for 2 months." The world around me stopped. Roger, her colleague she mentioned occasionally in conversation. Now everything fell into place. The late nights at work, the irritability, the avoidance of intimacy, the distance between us. "You're leaving me for a cat?" I asked, not believing my own words. "I'm leaving you because you chose a cat over me," she replied. "You didn't even ask if I wanted an animal in the house. You just brought him home and said, 'Here's our new family member.' And when I started getting sick, you didn't even think to connect it to the cat." I stood there silently, feeling my entire life crumbling around me. "What about Roger? Did he also just happen to appear?" Rebecca sighed deeply. "At first, I was just staying late at the office to spend less time at home with the cat. Roger often worked late too. We started talking, he understood my situation. One evening he invited me for coffee so I wouldn't have to hurry home. Then again. And then you decided it was better to cheat on me than just tell the truth about the allergy. I was afraid you wouldn't understand me. And I was right. Even now you're thinking about the cat, not about our marriage." The accusation hit me like a physical blow because there was truth in it. I was thinking about Charlie, about having to give up this creature who had become such an important part of my life. But I was also thinking about 7 years of marriage dissolving because we couldn't have an honest conversation. "How long?" I asked. "What? How long have you been sleeping with him?" Rebecca's face flushed. 2 months. "I told you." "No, I mean really sleeping with him. Not just coffee dates and late-night conversations." She was quiet for a long moment. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. While I was at home with Charlie, wondering why my wife seemed so unhappy she was with another man. While I was planning romantic dinners and buying flowers, she was building a relationship with someone else. Does he know you're married? Of course he knows. He's going through a divorce too. His wife, she doesn't understand him the way I do. I almost laughed at the cliché of it all. The unfaithful spouse always believes they've found someone who understands them better than their current partner. So you're both destroying your marriages for each other? We're both leaving unhappy marriages for a chance at happiness, she corrected. Were you unhappy before Charlie? She paused, considering the question. I don't know. Maybe I was and just didn't realize it. Maybe the cat was just the catalyst that made me see what was wrong with us. Or maybe you're using the cat as an excuse to justify what you were already planning to do. That's not fair, Jake. Nothing about this is fair, Rebecca. She picked up her suitcase and moved toward the door. The divorce papers will be served next week. I've already spoken to a lawyer. How efficient of you. Don't be like that. This isn't easy for me either. Isn't it? You seem to have everything figured out. New boyfriend, new apartment, new life. All very neat and tidy. You think this is what I wanted? You think I wanted to destroy our marriage over a cat? I think you wanted out of our marriage and the cat gave you an excuse. She opened the door, then turned back to me one last time. Maybe you're right. Maybe I did want out. But if you had paid attention to me instead of that animal, maybe we could have worked through it. Maybe we could have found a solution that didn't involve me finding comfort in another man's arms. The door closed behind her, and I was alone with Charlie, who approached me and rubbed against my leg as if sensing my pain. The next few days passed in a haze of disbelief and anger. I called in sick to work and spent my time alternately raging and crying, with Charlie as my only witness to the destruction of my marriage. I learned through mutual friends that Roger was indeed getting divorced, and that he and Rebecca had already found an apartment together across town. They weren't wasting any time building their new life together. The divorce papers arrived exactly when she said they would. I read through them with a mixture of sadness and relief. She wasn't asking for much, just half of our savings and some furniture. She didn't want alimony, probably because she was moving in with Roger and his income was likely higher than mine anyway. I signed the papers without contest. What was the point of fighting? The marriage was over, had been over for months, probably. I'd just been too blind to see it. 2 weeks later, Rebecca came to collect the rest of her belongings while I was at work. I came home to find gaps where her books had been, empty spaces in the closet, missing pictures from the walls. She had taken our wedding album, but left behind all the photos of us together throughout our relationship. I found them in a box on the kitchen counter with a note. Thought you might want these. R. I looked through the photos trying to remember the people we had been. Young, happy, seemingly in love. When had that changed? Had it been gradual, or had there been a specific moment when we started growing apart? Charlie jumped onto my lap as I sat with the photos spread around me. He purred and rubbed his head against my chest, offering the only comfort available to me. Well, buddy, I said to him, scratching behind his ears, looks like it's just you and me now. A month after Rebecca moved out, I ran into one of her former colleagues at the grocery store. Linda had worked in the same department as Rebecca and had always been friendly to both of us. Jake, how are you holding up? She asked with genuine concern. I'm managing, I replied, which was mostly true. How are things at the office? Linda looked uncomfortable. Well, it's been a bit awkward, to be honest. Rebecca and Roger. They're not being very discreet about their relationship. It's causing some tension because Roger is still technically married, and there are company policies about relationships between colleagues. I felt a strange satisfaction in knowing that their affair was causing them problems at work. It was petty of me, but I couldn't help it. Actually, Linda continued, lowering her voice, there's something I think you should know. Rebecca's allergy story. I don't think it's entirely true. My heart rate quickened. What do you mean? I've been to Rebecca's apartment before, you know, for work parties and things. She had a cat there. A gray tabby named Smokey. This was about 3 years ago, before she moved in with you. The world tilted slightly. She had a cat? Yeah, for at least 2 years. She loved that cat. She was always showing us pictures of him, talking about his little quirks and personality. When I asked her what happened to him after she moved in with you, she said he went to live with her sister because your apartment didn't allow pets. I stood there in the cereal aisle trying to process this information. Rebecca had owned a cat. She had loved a cat. She had given him up when she moved in with me, not because of allergies, but because of apartment rules that didn't actually exist. Are you sure about this? I asked Linda. Absolutely. I remember because she was really sad about having to give him up. She said it was one of the hardest things she'd ever had to do. I thanked Linda and finished my shopping in a daze. When I got home, I sat down with Charlie and tried to piece together the real story. Rebecca hadn't had an allergy to cats. She had owned and loved a cat before we lived together. When I brought Charlie home, it hadn't made her physically sick, it had made her emotionally sick. Seeing another cat in her space had probably reminded her of Smokey, of the sacrifice she had made to move in with me. But instead of telling me the truth, instead of explaining her emotional reaction to having a cat in the house again, she had invented an allergy story. And then, when that story became unsustainable, she had used it as justification for an affair that had probably started for entirely different reasons. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how many lies she must have told. The late nights at work, the weekend projects, the sudden need for allergy medication. It had all been an elaborate construction to hide her growing relationship with Roger. I felt anger rising in me again, but this time it was different. This time it was the anger of someone who had been systematically deceived, not just cheated on. I considered confronting her with this new information, but what would be the point? The divorce was already finalized. She was living with Roger. Our marriage was over, and knowing the full extent of her deception wouldn't change that. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, spending extra hours on job sites and taking on weekend projects. Charlie became my constant companion, and I found myself talking to him more than I talked to most people. "You know what, Charlie?" I would say while we sat together in the evenings. "Maybe she did us both a favor. Maybe we're better off without someone who lies so easily." 3 months after the divorce was final, I heard through the grapevine that Rebecca and Roger had gotten engaged. They were planning a quick wedding, probably to legitimize their relationship in the eyes of their colleagues and families. I felt surprisingly little at this news. No jealousy, no regret, just a kind of empty sadness for the years we had wasted together. 6 months later, I got a call from Rebecca. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Jake? It's Rebecca." I figured. "What do you want?" I wanted to apologize. For everything. For the lies, for the cheating, for the way I handled everything. I was quiet for a moment, not sure how to respond. "Why now?" I asked finally. "Roger and we're having problems. And I've been seeing a therapist, and she's helping me understand some things about myself." "What kind of problems?" He's not who I thought he was. When we were having an affair, he was attentive and understanding and made me feel special. But now that we're living together, now that the excitement of sneaking around is gone, he's different. He works just as much as he always did, but now I'm the one at home waiting for him. And he gets angry when I bring up my feelings, tells me I'm being needy. I found myself unsympathetic to her plight. What does this have to do with me? I realized that what I had with you, the stability, the companionship, the way you actually listened to me and cared about my day, I threw that away for what I thought was passion, but it was really just novelty. Rebecca, I'm not going to be your emotional support system while you work through your second failed relationship. I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong. About everything. About the cat, about you, about what I wanted from life. What about the cat thing? I know you didn't really have an allergy. There was a long pause. How do you know that? Linda told me about Smokey. Another long pause. I love that cat so much, Jake. When I had to give him up to move in with you, it broke my heart. And when you brought Charlie home, it brought back all that pain. I couldn't handle having another cat that I might have to give up, so I invented the allergy story. And then when I started getting involved with Roger, the allergy story became a convenient excuse for why I was avoiding home. So you lied about everything. Yes, I lied about everything. And I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix 7 years, Rebecca. I know. I wanted you to know that it wasn't your fault. Any of it. You were a good husband, and I was too selfish and immature to appreciate what we had. After we hung up, I sat with Charlie and thought about forgiveness. I wasn't ready to forgive Rebecca, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. But I was ready to let go of the anger that had been consuming me. A year after our divorce, I started dating again. It was difficult at first. Trusting someone new after being so thoroughly deceived was challenging. But Charlie was an excellent judge of character, and he helped me weed out the women who were put off by his presence or who seemed to want to change things about my life. I eventually met Sarah, a veterinarian who loved Charlie from the moment she met him. She understood my attachment to him and respected the role he played in my recovery from my marriage. "He saved your life in a way," she said one evening as we watched Charlie chase a toy mouse around my living room. He gave you companionship when you needed it most. She was right. Charlie had been my anchor during the worst period of my adult life. He had been loyal when my wife wasn't, honest when she was deceptive, and present when she was absent. 2 years later, Sarah and I got married in a small ceremony at a park downtown. Charlie served as our ring bearer, wearing a tiny bow tie that made him look dignified despite his obvious annoyance at being dressed up. As I watched Sarah laugh at Charlie's expression, I realized that I had learned something important from my first marriage's failure. Love isn't just about grand romantic gestures or passionate declarations. It's about daily kindness, honest communication, and the willingness to work through problems together instead of running away when things get difficult. Rebecca had taught me what love wasn't. It wasn't deception, it wasn't taking the easy way out when faced with conflict, and it wasn't putting your own immediate comfort above your partner's well-being. Charlie had taught me what love was. It was loyalty, companionship, and showing up consistently even when it wasn't convenient or exciting. And Sarah was teaching me that love could be both passionate and stable, both exciting and reliable. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Rebecca had just been honest from the beginning. If she had told me about Smokey, about her emotional connection to cats, about her fears and insecurities, we might have worked through it together. We might have found a solution that honored both her emotional needs and my desire to help a creature in need. But then again, maybe not. Maybe our fundamental incompatibilities would have surfaced eventually anyway. Maybe Rebecca was right that she wanted out of our marriage and Charlie was just the catalyst that made it happen sooner rather than later. Either way, I'm grateful now for how things turned out. Charlie is getting older now, graying around his muzzle and sleeping more than he used to. But he's still my faithful companion, still greeting me at the door when I come home from work, still purring contentedly when I scratch behind his ears. Sarah often jokes that she married both of us, and she's not wrong. Charlie is an integral part of our family, and any woman who wanted to be with me would have to accept that. Looking back, I realized that Rebecca's ultimatum, choose the cat or me, wasn't really about the cat at all. It was about control, about making me choose between my own instincts and desires and her comfort. A loving partner would have worked with me to find a solution that met both our needs. An honest partner would have explained her real feelings instead of inventing a medical condition. I chose the cat, and in doing so, I chose honesty, loyalty, and my own moral compass over a relationship that had become built on lies and avoidance. And that, I think, was the right choice. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.